beautiful souls. I hope that this, oh, how can I say it in a creative way? I hope that upon your rising of the day, the sun kisses you in just such a way that you're like, hey, today is going to be a good day. Like, no matter what you're going through. That's something that, it's funny. One of my bosses recently, it's funny, he asked me, he said, how are you today? I said, I'm doing good. He said, how about you? And he said, I never have a bad day. And I loved that. I was like, you know what? I've never said that, but I love that. And I love that. Like, that's something, I don't know if to say that exact thing, but it got me to thinking about, it's rare when I have a bad day anymore. Like, I feel like I used to have bad days all the time, late to stuff all the time, problems doing organization, things like that. And it was really nice to be able to hear someone else say that and be like, you know, how often has it been that I've had a bad day lately? And I really haven't. Like, there's been, I won't say necessarily bad things that have happened, but like there's been low vibe, icky, sticky things that have happened that people would qualify as bad things. Um, but because in general, I do not have bad days, even that stuff doesn't, it doesn't derail from the path. It doesn't derail from gratitude. It doesn't derail from enjoying the rest of things that are around. And especially with stuff going on with my kiddos, like in the past, like that would have totally like taken me out. I would have been like depressed on a couch, you know what I mean? And we wouldn't be doing the fun stuff that we're doing. And I certainly wouldn't have thought that I could have done it myself, and I am. And I'm grateful that I am. I'm grateful that I can. I'm grateful to the people in my life now that say things like that. I never have a bad day. And, mm, you know, it makes me sit back and think of all the beautiful things that I've gotten to do, that I get to do, like saying that I work on an alpaca farm. Like, I've talked to a lot of people that more than I normally would. Usually it's just work and the kids, a few friends. Like, no, don't really need much more than that right now. But there's been a lot of people to talk to with things going on, and so like I love that part of my stories get to be, well, at the horse place or at the alpaca place, or I work with alpaca, or I'm up on alpaca farm, the signal's not so great, or and things like that when I'm talking to people. And it's like, yes, this is my life. Like, I've always been a very eccentric person, and like, but I've never really let myself like follow that natural eccentricity, because it always came around, oh, you're weird and stuff like that. And then it was like, you know what, who cares what anybody else thinks? What do I think about it? And I love that. In any case, I was actually feeling called to start doing, I love the vlogging that I was doing, especially like when we did Venus and Mars and Capricorn and all that stuff. And I was like, and I don't want to just like make one up, you know what I mean? Like, I usually wait until I feel called to, but then I was like, maybe the thoughts are feeling called to do it, because that is often an indication you feel called to do something. And I thought, you know what, we are getting ready for Mercury retrograde, and those typically are very interesting, and this one in particular seems to be not mirroring, but like reflecting one that happened about 7 months ago. And I'm like going, I mean, why not? Let's blog it and see what happens. And then something else came in that was like, oh, that's a good bit of knowledge. And I was thinking about like situations where you have like a DM or a DF or a DX who's with a karmic, and like that, in a way that, like, there's no way for you to necessarily pull away from it to just go and like work on you stuff, because that's, in terms of twin flamey stuff, that's kind of the gold standard. You go do you go glow up. If you're right about who your twin flame is, they'll catch up. Just have faith in them. And I still stand by that for the most part. But there are other things. Like, I've been one of the biggest people to preach, or treach, if you want to call it that, and, through the years of my channel, that you need to work on your shadows and you need to work on your light. And there's been so many times in tarot readings too that, like, Lady of the Lake test has come up. And the Lady of the Lake test is it was interesting because I remember I believe I even did a video where I talked about, I don't know what all this means, but I do know that it is significant. And for those of you that, found relevance in it, I'm sure that helped in the moment. But I finally realized what the test is. And it's actually funny. Spirit showed it to me through a song that the Divine Maverick, her channel's now the Divine Maverick Show, often uses, which is, I'm every woman, it's all in me. And what I was thinking about is, like, looking at all the ways that, like let's say with my DM, I was actually first thinking about all the light in him. And I already was like, yes, and I recognize that I appreciate that because that reflects my light. Like, the ways that I am good and benevolent, I see those reflected in him in so many ways, and I'm like, yes, feels like home, you know what I mean? And I've already been working on, like, the shadows. Like, there are shadows that he shows that are reflections of my shadows, and I've already been working to, like, embrace it is the word, but it's not in the way that I think we generally apply embrace. Because I think a lot of people look at someone else as reflecting a shadow, and they're like, well, if you're going to be that way, I'm going to be that way. And funny enough, that's one of our shadows, kind of a tit for tat thing. But, like, I was already in a place where it was like, yeah, you know what? I embrace the shadows and lights within me that I see and feel and sense reflected in my DM. And that was easy. That was an easy, like, yeah, all right, yeah. I can recognize the stubbornness, the pride, even some amount of manipulation, things like that. Like, I can recognize that. And, like, but this is what I mean by embraces. Like, that doesn't mean that I let myself just dive into, like, I'm going to do those things. There is some amount where there will probably be times, not that you'll want to necessarily do those things, but that you will find that you are doing those things. And sometimes I've found with shadow work, especially when it comes to the ego, sometimes you have to find an evolved way to let yourself do something that in the past would have been, like, from victim mindset, or from like, feeling hurt, or doing the tit for tat thing. And, like, it's a weird sort of, like, inner work test. I want to call it Jungian, but it's not. Obviously, I mean, it's not something I read from him. And maybe it's something that he did do, and I've read a lot of works from him. So, like, I don't know. It feels like that sort of influence. So it's like a primal scream therapy or exposure therapy. Like, there are certain times when you'll be like, I will never do that thing again, because you realize it's bad. And then later, like, say in Mercury retrograde, you come upon a time where you feel called to do it again. And it's like, I mean, you don't have to, but there's certain, like, healing benefits, at certain, like wholeness. Like, what just came to mind is, think of the movie What Dreams May Come. Now imagine that the character, so there's Robin Williams' character, Chrissy, I think, and then his wife, who had gone insane and gone to hell, or at least a version of it, and he went to rescue her. But imagine that his wife was actually just a piece of himself that had gotten lost in the shadows, and that he was going in to rescue a piece of himself, right? So think of it more in that way. Like, he was being good and doing benevolent things, but he was also doing a shadowy thing. Like, everyone told me, you don't go in there and do that. You don't, you know what I mean? Like, it was good and it was bad. There was a combination of it, right? And similar thing too when you think of the Lady of the Lake stuff, like King Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot and all that stuff. Like, they were trying to get Excalibur so that they could defend, the castle and the kingdom and things like that, and have, like, rightful kingship and stuff like that. But it's also, like, steeped in a lot of things. It's like, a lot of bad things happened after they got Excalibur. Let's put it that way. A lot of people abused it, a lot of things like that. And it was also in kind of a victim-y, like, hero, villain, victim sort of mindset, to where I have to beat the other side before they can get it, so I have to do this. And, like, yes, they passed the test, they found that thing, but it was also like, did you have to do it that way? You didn't have to have wars, you didn't have to have battles, you didn't have to have things like that, you know? Um, but if you think about it, like the Lady of the Lake test, in almost every version except the original version, but like I still apply a lot of. I like to look at all things, the whole, right? And a lot of most of the versions are where whoever is going to get Excalibur from the lake must fight themselves effectively. Like the Lady of the Lake test is where like an equally powerful version of you appears, but it's usually the shadow side of you, and it knows all your moves, it knows all your tricks, it knows all your manipulations, and it knows all your worst fears, it knows what your ego is like, you know what I mean, like whatever it can do to scare you, bribe you, manipulate you, push you to do those things, to give up or to be defeated, you know, things like that, it will do that. And we have a lot of stories throughout, you know, human history of similar type tests, where it's basically you are fighting yourself. And the way, for those of you who are your mythology buffs, history buffs, literature buffs, or you just happen to have read a few of these stories, usually the answer is not to fight that reflection of yourself, it's to hug it, to embrace it, to say, you know what? You are a part of me too, and I love you, right? And upon thinking about that, I thought about the karmics in my life. The few that remain. I released most of them. There was a lot. It's funny because when I realized that, like, I want to say like 9 or 10 months ago, I realized that was another shadow reflection that I was seeing reflected from my DM. It's like, it's not just one or two karmics. It's not just romantic relationships. It's not just family. They're everywhere right now, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Like you could make all sorts of different scenarios work in different sorts of ways, and keep, you know, learning various bits of karma. But for me, that's what I kind of look back on. It's like, look at how these generations have been going. Look at, like, particularly one of the big things that got me is how the world treats children. And like one of the things that I've been most upset about throughout my life is how I got treated as a child. And most of the stuff that I hear people process about and complain about and vent about, and what most modern psychology is based on, are the ways that we got screwed up as kids. You know what I mean? Like, and then there was all the stuff with the indigenous residential children being unburied and like all this different stuff. And it was like, I can see everyone else around me that's doing all this stuff that I can see are clearly messing up kids, including my own. But then I had to take that moment to realize, you know what? If I accept it, if I sit with it, if I capitulate about it, if I placate to people who are doing it, if I justify it, how am I any better? How am I any less of a pirate? You know what I mean? And that's when it was like, you know what? I do love all these people, and I'm not sitting with it anymore. I did my best to try to get them to see what they were doing to themselves as well as kids and me and everyone else, and they weren't there. And one of the lessons was like, I've always waited for people. I've always held myself back to be like, oh, they're not ready yet. I'll just like eat that feeling and wait until they're more ready. You know, more ready, at least more ready before I go. You know what I mean? And it was like, no, that's an old karma lesson. That's a karmic for me, or that was. And it was like, no, you know what? I realized part of the reason I was doing that is because I didn't have any faith in them to be able to heal themselves, to be able to figure out how a genuine apology works, how to change behavior, how to do the right thing. And what was interesting is I had already learned how to love from an unconditional space and believe in people even while they're going through their dark nights of soul and shadowy stuff, by the stuff that I'd learned through the twin flame journey, both from other people and from my own personal interactions with my DM. You know? Tarot 30. Oh, I hear you. I'm glad you're listening. Drive safe. But no, so like, I had already learned how to love from that space, and then I was thinking about various different things because we have 3D things, how people think about relationships, and a lot of as twin flames, that like there's a lot of stuff that comes up like that, like something like from the 5D that you can see confirmation of in the 3D, but general society and people who don't have like a motivation for having an attachment of that kind don't really get it. So you get a lot of like, well, but I'm not seeing these obvious indications right here, but you as a spiritual being as well as a logical being know that you can have your own experience, and so can they. So like there are differences. But I was thinking about like the 3D indications of things, and like I often do that. I talk with my therapist about it. I try to be balanced. Like, what is the dry scientific empirical and thing, and then what is the psychology thing, because it's often kind of in the middle, and then what's my spiritual thing, like what do I know from the three of these things, and then not only what is the healthiest way to approach the situation, but what's the way that's going to be fun, and what's the way that I'm going to feel grateful for myself and for others around as things go on. And it's kind of one of those, like, if you think about the question of how will you feel in the morning if you don't do this thing today? How will you feel in the morning if you do this thing today? Or if you don't go, or if you do go, or if you stay, or, like, I think a lot of people, especially in the twin flame journey, sit and they're like, well, but should I leave them? Should I go? And they're behaving this way and that way and this way. Instead, slow down and ask yourself the question, how will I feel tomorrow if I do this thing today, if I think this way today, if I say these things today, if I don't say, don't feel these things? And you can take it further. How will I feel in a week? How will I feel in a month, in a year? And that's actually something that's guided me a lot, because with my DM and I, like, we, between therapy and all sorts of different things that I would say that we succeeded through a lot of it. Obviously not all of it at the time, but a lot of people will ask the question, like, when you're mad or you're distressed or upset or desperate or things like that, ask, like, will this still feel like a big deal in a week? How about 2 weeks? How about a month? Like, and if it wouldn't feel like a big deal in a week, then it's definitely not worth being that upset about it, taking that personally right in that moment. And then again, like, if it wouldn't feel like a big deal at all in 2 weeks, again, like, maybe it's maybe a little more than the week thing, but it's really not, it's not worth being that upset about. And same thing with the month. Even if it would still be a big deal in a week, or it would be a big deal in 2 weeks, okay, but or like those ones, it's like, nah. But if it would still be a big deal in a month, then okay, maybe you approach that thing like, this would still really bother me in a month. Okay, so then process it. Talk with your therapist about it. Call a coach like me. Talk to me. Do whatever thing. Talk to your friends about it and figure out how to find a resolution. Don't just sit there and retell the story just to tell the story. But in any case, I was thinking about that stuff, and I was thinking about, like, the accepting of the moment. A lot of the twin flame journey is learning healthy forms of acceptance, and healthy forms of unconditional love, and healthy forms of faith and things like that. Like, unconditional love, I've seen plenty of experiences and have had on my own times when people say, well, I love you unconditionally, but what that actually means is codependently. Like, I will let you walk all over me, and you let me walk all over you, and I will never make you leave even though I'm going to treat you badly, or I know you're going to treat me badly. And, like, that's not unconditional love. It can feel like it to a lot of the world. You know what I mean? A lot of the world even jokes about things like that. It's the whole, like, the famous words of every husband, yes, dear. Like, that's not love. I'm not saying the man does not love the woman. I'm saying that's a codependent relationship. Like, yes, dear is definitely something that, can be said fairly often, but that actually amounts to placation most of the time. And that's not unconditional love. Unconditional love is a space of, like, even if you need to have healthy boundaries with someone where you're like, they're in such a shadow place, and I am, I want to be more in the light, or I want to be in balance with my light and my shadow, that I'm going to have boundaries, and I'm going to find other healthy things to do while they learn what they need to learn. See, that's unconditional love. Like, have that faith. They will get to a healthy place in their own time and space, right? And it's true if it rhymes. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, maybe it's true. But either way, you get to that space to where you recognize you don't need to hate anybody. You don't need to drop faith in people. I hear a lot of people that are like they've had similar stories to mine as far as my family and even twin flame stuff. And but they're in a space of like, yes, I can never talk to my family again because they just did this and they did that and they did this. And I don't ever correct anybody on that. But my thinking of it is like, if your family got to a space where you could no longer be around them so that you could go and get to a higher space, it's very likely that they held on to resentment and bitterness. And if you are reflecting that stuff, like, it's not, oh, you should go give them another chance. A lot of people will tell you that. That's, I'm not saying don't give them another chance, but like they will be like, oh, you're just holding a grudge and stuff like that, which is a nugget of truth. And you don't want to be in a space with somebody that you know that is not healthy for you to be around, of holding on to resentment and bitterness with them, because that, that locks in and it starts to poison you, right? And so you want to be in a space where you're like, you know what, I recognize that we're not compatible. Our vibrations are very different. I'm up in this dimension up here trying to do good and light and embrace myself and do things like that, and exploring the good and the bad of the shadow and the light and things like that, whereas they're down here like, woe is me, and trying to manipulate people, and people are getting hurt or sucked in and things like that. And it's like, these are the lessons they need to learn. These are the lessons that I want to learn and where I'm at. And if I keep coming down here to them, I'm just going to keep doing this stuff with them. This is their lessons, Don't be in a space of like, well, they're horrible and they're never going to change. No, they'll get up here. I don't know if it's this lifetime, another lifetime, a day, a month, a year, 10 years, but they'll get there. And I genuinely believe that. And like, my whole vibration changed the minute that I stopped going to that pirate place with everyone else. If they're never going to change and I just have to cut them off. No, like, even when I have pushed people away so that I could have the space, so I could have the safety, so I could have the protection, so I could work on myself and my parenting and things like that, I never did it in such a way that it was like, I never want anything to do with you again. Now, a lot of people took it that way, but I also recognized that's their lesson, not mine. Like, it doesn't always feel good, and there are definitely of consequences of it, that like, some people are always going to be there and not come back. That's okay. It's okay. There's lots of magic in the world. There's lots of people in the world. There's lots of things to do and ways to feel, and definitely things. And if you don't rendezvous again in this lifetime with that, that's fine. And to Cabot trail back to where I began, these are lessons that I learned mostly through, the dynamics and the karmic lessons that I learned in interacting with my DM, and especially with, the environments that he puts himself in. And I realized that I can embrace unconditional love for everyone. I can have faith in everyone. Even with recent events that happened with my adoptive family and communication with the kids. Like, with both the kids, I did tell them, I said, no, we're going to be very cautious about this. Though I remember talking with my oldest, like, throughout this whole thing, like, it was really hard for him not to just completely lose hope in everyone. I said, look, everyone has shadow and light. Everyone. We're seeing theirs. We're not going to go to a place where we hold them in that space. We're going to recognize they have shadow and light. And I didn't want to, I didn't want him to make him feel like I was, blowing smoke at him about stuff. And I also didn't want to be unrealistic in a 3D empirical / psychological way and be like, oh no, everybody will be fine. Like, that's more of a spiritual sense on my end. I don't have proof for that. And if I were to be wrong, that could hurt him more. So, like, I just tried to be in a general space of like, hey, you know what? Even if there are never any changes, we can choose how we feel, and we can decide to believe in the best of people. Like, we can have faith in people's light as much as in their shadow. So, like, recognize that a lot of people, including the people that we love, often get themselves so locked up in their own shadows and their own dark nights of souls that they will unravel their own stuff. They will learn their own karma lessons in there, and that will get them to the light much faster than us, like waiting for them or trying to push them to do it or things like that. And and to have some communication recently, like it's still on that line because there's not really been a lot of indications of like remorsefulness or intention to get healthier or anything like that. But we're not going to be in a space of like that. Like that doesn't have to be like an ultimatum. But it is a good indication, especially you see how people interact when you ask them to be healthier for you, for kids, for themselves, things like that. Like that can indicate a lot. Like somebody's response to that sort of thing, not necessarily at first, but like at least over time, can really show you whether or not the boundaries that you're keeping are healthy or not. I was just thinking you need to be careful of that too, because the ego is very tricky and sometimes it can make things look logical to do that are not necessarily all logic. You only you know for you, and this is why it's good to employ coaches and therapists and healthy friends and things like that, so that you're not just going off of you, right? But in any case, it made me think about the Lady of the Lake test, and it's like, you know what? I embrace the light and the shadow that it's within me that I see reflected in others. Because there's a lot of times that I can look at shadows from people and go, I used to do that. Now I'm really proud of myself because there was a time when it's like, oh, I'm doing that too. How can I can't say anything to them. I'm doing it too. And now I'm in a space of saying I used to do that. And I think that's where you really see the healing inner work that leads to things like twin flame union. It doesn't always guarantee it, but it leads that direction, because you get to a place where you can look back at the healthy work you've done, at the self-love you show yourself, at the way that new people and old people reflect around you, both in shadow and light, and you could say, that used to be me. I used to do that. And for me, it's like looking at, it used to be me. And then I was that person that it already used to be me. I stopped doing this stuff, but I wasn't speaking up. I wasn't saying, hey, that's not okay. I was allowing myself to be around people who felt all those things were okay. And now I'm the person that it's like, that used to be me, and then I used to be the coward who didn't say anything, and now I'm in the space of, no, I can be me, I can be good, I can speak up, I can be courageous in moments when it's necessary without being emotionally dysregulated and like overdoing it most of the time, and like that feels good. Now, when I thought about how many people that have done some pretty big things to me and my children that most people would find unforgivable, I was already in a space of being, I mean, it's not perfect. Like, I'm human and I'm still like, that wasn't okay. But I'm not in a space of like, you're horrible and this and this and this and this and that. It's like, oh, you know what? I can recognize, like, especially, I think that for me, like, I get more upset about the shadowy things done that I would not do, which is changed, because it used to be I would get more triggered by the things that I had done, and that's how most people are. You can usually tell what the truth is with someone by how they react when you talk about it, like, and if they react wildly and can become unstable about it, it's likely true. Because people, oddly, well, not oddly enough, it's because we have shame culture. People react more negatively and more intensely and become more unstable when you bring up an ugly truth about them or people around them, even about yourself. Like, the odd thing is, like, even if you are in a good space about it, they remember how they would feel about it and react badly. And when it's not true, usually they don't care that much. They don't react that way. They don't ignore it. They don't like evade it. It's just kind of like an apathy about it, like a neutral space, like, and for me nowadays it's a grateful space, like, because I think a lot of people try to go to neutrality and find they're really just compartmentalizing things and poisoning themselves with the shadows of that, whereas I look for what can I feel grateful about in each experience, and I think that's part of the Lady of the Lake test. And so, to Cabot Trail again, I got back to that place of thinking about some of the karmics that have really, like, in the past, I don't know, really brought me into a shadowy space within myself. And I was like, that's what it is. Like, that's how you release them. That's how you release, and in fact, it's part of how you release your twin flame too. And usually you have to do that before there's any room for a, new union or a reunion of a healthy kind to happen. You have to be able to release it in a good way. Because when you release things about, oh, they're just bad and they just do these things and I don't like this and this and that, you're not really releasing it. You're pushing it away, you're running away from it, or you're blocking it, but you're not actually releasing it. Releasing is in a good way, it's allowing it to flow. It's not necessarily saying it's going to go away all the time or anything like that. You're just releasing it. It's a flow, like a river. It's not a blockage. It's not a dam. It's not, it's like the adjacent doorways card. Like, you're just exploring the different things in it. You're releasing it. If it stays, you explore it. If it goes, you explore that. You don't hold yourself in a space of it. And that had me thinking about some of the more shadowy stuff that some of these karmics have done or are doing, or that I'm finding out that they did. And I thought, okay, but one thing that I've learned, especially from that I'm every woman, it's all in me, right? And the lessons I dearly appreciate from Divine Maverick and her guides, like, we are all reflecting each other. And so I thought about that Lady of the Lake test and the embracing of the light and the shadow in others. And I was like, how can I embrace things that I haven't ever done and wouldn't ever do, and some of which are really unspeakable? You know what I mean? Like, how? How can I embrace that in me? But I thought, but that's why it's the Lady of the Lake test. Like, it's easier. I mean, it's not always easy at first. A lot of the twin flames. It's not always easy to embrace the shadows within yourself that you see reflected in your twin flame. Sometimes, in fact, ironically, that's often the hardest part, right? But because there is love there, you can get there. The question is how stubborn you're going to be along the way. Though, it's one of those, like, if you cannot do this with everyone, and it's not, like, I'm not saying necessarily for a focus on karmics, but look for that space where you have a hard time accepting the reflection of your own shadows in other people, and those are often your karmics, right? And some of them are they're not meant to stay karmics. Like, some of them are soulmates. Some of them are, like, family soulmates or romantic soulmates. Some of them are your twin flames. Like, we are all things. We are the twin flame. We are the karmic. We are the soulmate. We are the friend. We are the parent. We are the child. Like, we are all there. We are in all things, and all things are within us. And we're also individual too. I was going to say indivisible, like from the pledge, which is interesting. We are all indivisible. That's true too. Anyways, but I got to the place and it was like, where can I find a space that I can do the Lady of the Lake thing with many of these karmics and be in a space of, like, hugging my shadow self and not like saying this is acceptable and we could do this, but loving it in the way that, like, if my kids did something shadowy, like, I wouldn't be mad at them, I wouldn't punish them, I would help them learn self-discipline in order to not do those things again, though I wouldn't be upset with them. I love them unconditionally, and I thought about how can I apply this now, like, say, I don't know, pick any criminal from the news that's done, like, heinous things. Like, how can you sense a reflection from yourself that, probably shadowy, but also look for the light in them that you can embrace? And here's the thing, like, you don't have to have been as big or as bad or as negative or anything like that. But there's been times in your life when you've probably done milder versions of those same sorts of things. Manipulated a situation, lied about something, stolen something. Like, in our society, like, anybody that says they've never done those things, it would be hard to believe that. You know what I mean? Like, it's so many things that are acceptable. Even something as simple as, like, The last time we went to the drive-in movie theater, I had us get food before we went there because I know that drive-in movie theaters typically are spendy, right? And I didn't have a whole lot of money, and I did have EBT, so I was like, okay, I want to ensure my kids have a good time. I don't know what the rules are. Like, it might be that you can't have food, but I don't know. And when we got there, we saw that the sign said no outside food or beverages, and so I had told the boys, I said, okay, well, we'll put this down, and, we'll be okay. And what's funny is when I talked to my youngest about it, about going back there, and he was like, okay, but, let's make sure that we eat some food beforehand, and that we save some money to get some popcorn there and stuff. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, look at him. Like, in fact, if he had not said that, I probably would have done the same thing and been like, nah, this is a tradition with the movies. Like, this is my dad, half my friends, my family, think people like that. No, you always sneak stuff into the movies. It was kind of part of the thrill of it. But then I looked at that and I was like, wait a minute. Why is it a tradition? Why is it thrilling to break the rules? Why does it feel good? And it's such a small, simple thing. I'm sure that you've done it, or maybe not that particular, maybe a regular movie theater, maybe something else. Maybe you took a towel from a hotel, maybe or the little shampoo bottles that you weren't even really going to use that are sitting in your garage. Like there are all these times that it's like we go, it's not hurting anybody, and it's just a little thing, or we justify, well, I don't have enough money, or this and this and that. But it's like, why did that feel good? Why did I find that acceptable? But then, like, if someone else did it, would I call them out on it? Would I say, hey, that's not a good thing to teach the children? And what's funny is even later I fell into it. Yeah, right. Your mom used to talk about, smuggling friends in the drive-in trunk. Yeah, see, like, so many people have done things like that, and we go, yeah, oh, that's totally okay, right? And it's funny because I even forgot about it later, and then my youngest and I were talking about it yesterday because I had told them I would do it once a month, but there's been some things going on that I'm like, okay, it's gonna hurt me financially for a little bit, but I'm gonna take them again. And I was like, we should get some popcorn before we go, and my youngest was like, well, no, remember it said no outside food or drinks. We gotta get popcorn there. And I was like, I love everything about you. You know what I mean? And old me would have been like, maybe would have tried to talk him into, no, we'll just do it this way, and this and this and this is okay. But then I thought, I wouldn't be okay with someone else teaching him that. You know what I mean? And why is it okay? Why? Why is it okay? And even, when my oldest and I were going through homelessness, and we, some community members helped us stay in hotels, I thought about, oh, I should take the soap in case we don't have soap, and maybe I'll take a towel or two. Like, they don't charge for that, and they're not going to be missing it. People steal towels all the time, and steal bathrobes and all that stuff. And I was like, no. I remember thinking about that. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I think it was funny. I did it once for a washcloth that I needed for my lady time of the month, and I'm not I actually looked at that and was like, I mean, I can justify this, but should I? And how will I feel about it? And I didn't like the way that felt. Even just little things. And funny enough, my youngest was telling me about a vision that he had before he fell asleep. Just a part of it stuck out to me. He said he saw a BMX bike that said "Teg Ready" on it. And just at the same time that I had a thought that it, Teg backwards is get, maybe it's get ready, he said, "Teg Ready. That sounds like integrity." And I was like, oh man, I love you, kiddo, and I love how Spirit's working with this stuff. And it feels like, we talk about it, it feels like both. Get ready, integrity. Integrity, get ready. Something like that, right? And it was on a BMX bike, so having fun, exercise, even mechanics of things, how many things can we look at that? But no, so I thought about the karmics and stuff, and it was like, you know what? I could never be in a place where I'd be justifying doing the level of things that they have done. Though I have snuck candy into movies before. I've done little things like that. Little things here and there. Oh, this white lie's okay, and that, and this, and this, and this, and that. And it was actually 12 to 13 months ago that I realized that about myself, and it was like, wait a minute. My DM's the first one to look at me sometimes, and I'm like, you can't do this around the children, or you can't be this way. And he'll be like, you're just as bad, and well, actually, most of the time it was, well, your family's just as bad. It was actually me. I looked at my end, and I thought about how he'd said that, how he saw a reflection around me in almost all the things that I saw in the people around him. And then between me and him, I realized, you know what? Part of the reason that it is not good to be in a win-lose mindset is because between you and your twin flame, there's never a win or lose. You will always stalemate. Like, you'll always stalemate. And that's another part of the Lady of the Lake test. Like, you will always stalemate. You will always sit there unless you embrace all parts of both of you. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that you allow unhealthy parts. Like, your boundaries, you don't allow yourself to do unhealthy things all the time just because they're doing it. No, but you can embrace that you have let yourself do that in the past, that you have been that way. And look at, like, if you're holding yourself in a place of, like, I'm too good for this shit, like, what is that? That's pride. Like, I'm not, the pride is not all bad. All things have shadow and light, but that's not a good pride. Like, that's holding yourself in a space of, like, I'm better than these people. I'm better than that person. And it's important to say, I'm better than this behavior. Like, I'm not going to act in this way. I'm not going to reflect that. I'm not going to do that again. Things like that. And, like, but it's not good to be like, I'm too good for this stuff. And then, like, treat people like they are lesser than you, which you will do if you think that way, even if you don't see yourself doing those things. And so, I thought about it, and I thought, that is it, isn't it? That's the Lady of the Lake test. Like, it's, you got to be able to look at your twin flame, your karmics, their karmics, the people in the world, the situations that are very upsetting. Like the times when that help is needed, or justice is deserved, or things are not righteous, moments of righteous indignation, and you can stop and choose to change the cycle by no longer being in a resentful place or just like slamming on people about it. Like, you can make note of it, you can observe it, in fact, I encourage you to. It helps actually show you how people change for the better over time, because a lot of times in our minds we look at how people have done us wrong, and then we just keep looking for that. Like, when we don't journal, when we don't note, when we don't look at it, all we see are those things. Like, when it's just you and your mind and your ego and your conditioning, that's all you see. But if you journal things and you're genuine and honest about what yourself and other people and stuff, you can see positive changes over time too. And that can help you get to a place to where you can tell the difference between somebody that's not likely to be in your vibration for this lifetime, because they're definitely not compatible, versus people that, they had to go through their own karmic learning lessons just like you did. And then you can get to that space to where even, you're like, you know what, I see the reflection. They justified something much bigger and much worse than the stuff that I justified, but I have justified it. And like, there was, like, think of the movies thing. Like, if you were a little kid and your parents taught you to sneak stuff into the movies and that was fun and acceptable, you probably still have a feeling of like, oh, but it's fun to do that. And like, think about that amplified. Like, if you amplified that times 5, times 10, times 50, the people that do that stuff, they typically were taught a similar thing. It's fun to scare people. It's fun to bully people. It's, what did they always teach us as a kid? When another kid is picking on you, they really just like you. Like, look how toxic and codependent that is. Like, our generation in particular, and the ones before, were raised that way. No, that should never be a sign that somebody likes you. I mean, flirting with you and stuff, sure, but there's a big difference between like playful banter and somebody bullying you and picking on you and things like that. And the funny thing is like, that's where we can change these cycles that brought us a world like this, is to look at each person around us as human, as just as deserving of acceptance, empathy, kindness, recognition, all those things, forgiveness even. Then we get that back, because you get what you give, right? And so, especially in those like high intensity moments with people, with people you love and people that maybe you love a little bit less, you get to a place where you can recognize, okay, I would never justify something as big as that, something as awful as that, or something as unspeakable as that. However, I can embrace that I have done smaller things, that I can have empathy for how we get there, how we get conditioned to that space, and how challenging it can be, whether it's small things or big things that you've been conditioned to accept, to create, to manifest, to ignore, that you can recognize and go, you know what? I see you. What is that? Namaste? The spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you, right? And when you get to that space, you're close to passing the Lady of the Lake test. You're close to being able to pass through the first gate in Neverending Story, where only the pure of heart can pass through, and you don't have to run through it like a trail did. You can walk through it because you have nothing to fear from those statues, because it's not necessarily that you're pure of heart, but you're accepting of all of yourself and all of the things around you in the universe. And it's you looking in the mirror of Erised from Dumbledore's secret stash, and seeing yourself holding a pair of new socks like Dumbledore said that he was, because really in that one it's like we're always going to want things. I love the lesson in that. Like, he could have just seen himself just as he is. It could have been a regular mirror for him, because maybe the magic didn't exist because he was humble enough that he didn't see anything he really wanted. But he's human too. He has an ego too. In fact, I love the way that, although I'm not happy with the turf stuff from the author, I do like the way she wrote Dumbledore, in the sense that he embraced his ego too, and he was sometimes over careful, but like he was careful about recognizing how his own ego could get in the way, right? And so in him saying that what he saw in the mirror was him holding a new pair of socks, like, that makes sense. Like, it's not saying I'm so good that I don't see nothing, but it is saying, like, I'm at such a place that all I really, like, I always love, there's something personal for me, is I always love new socks, that feeling of new socks. I don't know why. Like, it's a sensory thing. It feels good, like, just new socks, and it was like, yeah, like, so, when you can pass the test of the mirror of Erised, which is that, a lot of people have wasted away sitting in front of the mirror because they see in the mirror everything that they would like in life, and that they don't see reflected in the rest of their lives the things that they want. What is it? In fact, that quote has been circling around. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, right? And so people do that. They think about what they want, and they see it in their mind's eye reflected in that mirror of, like, I can see it in my head. I see what I want, but I don't see this in my 3D life around me. But what the nice thing is like, when when you have almost everything that you want, even when things are chaos and circusry, like, you still get to a place to where it's like, man, a fresh pair of socks always feels wonderful, and I always want a fresh pair of socks. And then that sits in your heart in a good space, because it's such a simple, tangible thing. And that's when you get to that space where you can pass the mirror of Erised, you can pass the Lady of the Lake test, and then guess what starts to happen? You start to see the signs, usually from spirit first, but also from the collective around you, that your twin flame is coming in. And like, I'm saying, call them in. I'm not necessarily saying that this, automatically creates union. I do believe that it's a part of it, and it goes along with the other lessons that we've learned and stuff, but definitely it's there. What was your message? The tarot crowding? I know about other people in the Quran or in the Bible. I can't remember. It talks about conception. When a child is conceived, God breathes a fraction of breath. Oh, come on. Show me. No. Here we go. Breathes a fraction of a breath into a mother when she's a child. Interesting. I'm my mind isn't in a space where I'm remembering the part of that inspired that, but, like, thank you. Like, interesting. Breathes an extra breath of life, and to do that, right? That is true. And then it's our job as parents, especially as mothers, especially with Mama's Day coming up, to be the ones that breathe life into our children, right? It's incredibly humbling to think that all of us are a fraction of a breath of God, right? A fraction of a breath of spirit. I love that. Thank you for that. That is, and that's part of that whole, right? And so that includes people that we would consider karmics or shadowy. That includes situations that we'd consider karmic or shadowy. You know what I mean? So, when you can get to that space, and I can say from experience too, like, everything started getting better in my life when I embraced both. That balance. That's what benevolence is. Malevolence is trying to separate and divide and do things like that. Benevolence is a It's a balance. It's a harmony. And what is union? Look it up. Look up what synonyms and antonyms are to it. It's harmony. And that harmony starts within. So you want to call in your twin, you want to call in a soulmate, you want to call in a better job, you want to call in housing, you want to call in whatever. Do it within first. I embrace the light and the shadow within me, and I see reflected in you and everything else around, and that I feel as the fraction of the breath in me, and know is a fraction of a breath in you. See what I mean? All right, y'all. Thank you, the Tarot Crafty. I appreciate you visiting, and thank you. Let's see. I would like to see who you are, because I know you were there. Oh, okay. It's just you right now, the Tarot Crafty. I thought someone else had commented too. That's okay. I know people. I can see the view count. People come in and watch, do things. Anyways, Tarot Crafty, I hope you had a good drive. I hope that this live feed gave you something interesting to listen to. Obviously, you like some of it. And to everybody else, you have my deep appreciation. I embrace you because I am all of you and you are all of me. Oh, you know what? Tears are a beautiful thing in the right moments. There are definitely moments that tears are not, like when you make a kid cry. I don't think that that's okay. Though there are moments when we cry and it is the most healing thing ever. My DM used to talk about that. Like, he's like, you always know just the right way to make the tears fall from my eyes, and it is healing, right? And I'm like, mm-hmm. Like, and those were never times I was trying to, but they were good moments. And he knew how to do the same thing with me. And I, for a long time, had a hard time with allowing tears. So I think that was part of getting out of all the pirate stuff and going on the trip before I knew we were going to be homeless. Like, yeah, tears. What is it my DM used to say, or we used to say? Talking, time, or talking, tears, and time, the 3 T's, right? Those are healing. Embrace them. I love you all. I'm going to my alpaca job. I will see you in the next video.